Hey everyone. Hi, my name is JP, co-founder of Wallrus Creative Technologies. So today I'd like to kind of walk you all through our public art project, The Secret Life of Monster, and the creation of an AI or state machine that we built with the intent of creating lifelike interaction with people. So our company, we create memorable experiences that delight participants and connect them together in meaningful ways. So we're a creative technology agency. We manage and develop complex technology projects for experiential marketing, connected infrastructure, brand activation, and live entertainment. So if you've been to music festivals, if you're going to Formula One next week, you'll probably see some of the experience that we develop. We work a lot in the augmented reality space, web AR, anything that's mobile powered, and then we built our own state machines or low-level AIs, and always with the intention of building for the metaverse that's coming in the coming year. So we do our own R&D as well to make sure that we always stay on top of the innovation and to own some of the part that we develop. So we've been building a mixed reality framework that uses 5G to live stream a virtual world over the physical world with a 1-to-1 ratio. So we have a precision of about 1 centimeter. And to be able to showcase this abstract technology to people, we built a public art experience called The Secret Life of Monster. The goal of this artistic project is to show how our technology works and at the same time build upon the knowledge that we've learned in the last couple of years. This project will be deployed in October at the angle of Saint Laurent Metro. And people use a giant structure called the Monstroscope to have a one-on-one interaction and conversation with a creature that exists in a parallel dimension. At the same time, spectators can go around the site and then use their mobile phone to be able to see what the monster's world look like in real time. So the way that the site will look, if you've been to the Saint Laurent Metro, will be a bit like that. And this is the Monstroscope and the creature that people will interact with. This is really the main focus of the case study, and what I want to discuss today is how we built the interaction model and AI for this monster. So the intent of a project was really to be able to have lifelike interactions. So one of the biggest challenge that we had was to use and develop our own technology stack that had the lowest latency possible. So we wanted interactions that were as efficient as possible for a natural response time. And in cases where we weren't able to get it exactly, we found creative ways and artistic ways to kind of cheat it. And I'll go into those details a bit later. So the monster is mapped on a wall right next to the Saint Laurent Metro, and people interact with the creature through a physical construct. So that's a construction that we built. The reason why we built that structure was to be able to exert some kind of control on how participants would interact with a monster, and also because we use facial recognition technologies and so on, we needed to have a way to people be in a window so that we could calibrate our hardware effectively, since we didn't have an infinite amount of resource to do this project. So what we built is what we call a complex state machine that is affected by multiple parameters around planned interactions. So what that means is that the monster basically has a state, and then people can do multiple actions that will move the state of the monster to a different state, and then the monster will provide a response to the participant that interacts with him. In opposition, an artificial neural network is a probability machine. So it gets data and then it uses that data to make a guess. So in our case, because it's a one-on-one interaction, each interaction will last around 2 to 3 minutes. We wouldn't have enough data to be able to get something that would work. People can interact with the monster in 4 different ways. So they can interact with the monster with physical interaction. So that's gestures like a wave, facial expression as well is something that we track. Then the monster will listen to the sound intensity and react to that as well. So the voice intensity, the tone of voice as well is something that we recognize. After that, the monster recognizes speech. So it will recognize the words that are used, and then that will move his emotion with that. And there's also a couple of physical objects that we added on site to add kind of color and flourishes, such as the lighting, the sound, the soundscape as well. That will kind of change slightly his mood. So the stack that we used for a project like that, so in-house we built what we call the brain, so that it receives all input and decides the different outputs. This is a combination. We use the software Max MSP and Unreal Engine, naturally. Then we build our own proprietary language builder engine. Because people actually talk to the monster, there was a very, big challenge to make sure that the monster doesn't start, saying bad words and all that, since it's a family-friendly experience. So we build our own language where the monster takes the language that is spoken to him, then cuts it in different syllables, and then arrange the syllables back together and says it back to the participant. So in that way, if you're listening to it, it will sound like something familiar, but that will be at the same time completely alien. And depending if one new dominant language starts to be spoken to the monster, the language of the monster will evolve to sound like another language as well. We used a lot of motion capture, obviously, to be able to have lifelike movement from the creature. And one of the challenges in that was the in-between animation matrix, where you have each animation that's done by the monster, but we need to actually transition between animations, and we can't plan this in advance as well. And then we're building like the hardware, like the interaction board that's in the monster scope, and the 3D content as well. Off the shelf, so we use different neural networks. So we use the Amazon Recognize emotion recognition engine, the transcribed speech to text engine as well, because when people speak to the monster, we transcribe it to text, and then we use our algorithm on the text and then feed it back so that the monster can speak from that tense. And then we use TensorFlow to recognize the pose of people. And because latency was so important for us, what we actually did is create our own algorithm on top that only transmit geographical position, so that we're able to reduce latency and have all this sent in real time. So language recognition, as I said a bit earlier, it's really a question of having something that sounds natural, that sounds like something that you know, but that at the same time is completely alien. So that way, it always stays PG, and it always stays interesting for people as well. We also catalog them in a database, so that if someone says the same thing over time, the monster will answer the same answer as well, to keep it coherent as a language. The emotion model that we built is pretty simple, but at the same time, our goal was to have an emotion model that has 4 distinct emotions over 7 stages. And we wanted something that could save, that has a past state. So when you start speaking to the monster, if everyone's been rude to him, he's going to be in a bad mood. But at the same time, we wanted to stay away from extremes, because it's very easy to go to an extreme and stay there, and then the experience for the people on site will not be fun, and it will always kind of be the same. So each stage has a diminishing return over the next, making it more difficult to stay in the extreme, and kind of putting them back in the center, so that each person that interacts with the creature has a different experience as well. In terms of output, so the monster has facial expression, obviously, the monster gestures to the person it discusses with. At the same time, it has different voice intensity based on his mood and emotions. And then there's the verbal communication with the language. So the takeaways of this project for us, when we talk of AI, I think that it's kind of used at every sauce right now, and often it doesn't mean that much. One very important thing is to kind of differentiate a state machine versus an artificial neural network. Like a state machine, if you look at AI in video games, for example, it's state machines. So there's a lot of data, and you can build some things that are very complex. And where state machines, I think, are very good is when you don't necessarily have a super high volume of data, or when you actually control part of the context of the interaction. Like in our case, we use the monstroscope to control the context. So in that case, we're able to build something with a limited amount of resource. That's a lot more efficient than if we were trying to build our own artificial neural network. Artificial neural network are extremely good when you start with something that's abstract, like image or emotion recognition, and you have access to a huge volume of data that you can process. But the development time to do something like that that's actually good takes a lot more time. Also for us, because what we were looking was real time, we just weren't able, even the stack that we're using 5G to be able to have the lowest latency possible. And that's what actually makes those interaction possible. So I see a huge potential for like low-level AI or state machines in entertainment, because there's so many small things that you might be able to automate, but also to delight audience with real-time interactions that feel spontaneous, or that give an instant gratification. So that's kind of where a lot of our efforts are at the moment, as well as having the best computer vision as possible, so that we actually understand what's going on at that point. So that kind of ends my quick case study on the creation of a low-level AI state machine with our project, The Secret Life of Monsters. And I'll take it away to Paul.
Cool. Thanks. So we're going to talk a little bit about product management in AI projects, setting expectation with the leadership team, the executive team of your organization. What we're going to be talking about is what we do at Bain Public, where we work with organizations in putting in the processes, the tools, and the inner workings of how a leadership team who makes a decision to move forward with an AI project engages with some of these data scientists, engineers, and other people who are going to be, frankly, costing a lot of money for the organization. And somehow we need to see the benefit of what we're doing. So we're going to be talking a lot about optimizing reach for a company named WatchMojo. If you don't know WatchMojo, they're one of the biggest YouTube channels, a Canadian-based company here in Montreal that basically has about 24 million followers on their YouTube channel. They publish around 25 videos a day across their multiple channels. And at some point, we basically needed to work with them on trying to figure out with their leadership if an AI project was worth doing and what the real value was to continue the experiment of that initiative and move it forward. So first thing to know is that a channel manager for a YouTube channel spends their day analyzing the channel performance across the videos that they're publishing. WatchMojo's core channel, the WatchMojo channel, actually publishes about 5 to 7 videos a day. So the uploading schedules is something that really they spend a lot of time of. And these channel managers, whose job is to basically maximize the reach of every video, don't really have the time to really analyze the analytics. And besides, they're very creative individuals. They're not really numbers driven oftentimes. And they really find this entire analysis portion inefficient. And it does create a lot of issues. So we basically came with the point of view of no one knows anything, and what we really want to figure out is how do we get users to watch more of our videos. So the hypothesis was if we build a predictive analytic engine that recommends to channel manager what's the best time to publish a video, we could actually increase the number of views. So the most important thing when talking to leadership, now we're talking about the CEO, the CMO, the sales VPs, the CFO. Now these C-level executives need to understand why we're sinking so much money into an AI project. So it's important to explain to them what the benefits are. Because the biggest issue with AI is that there are no shortcuts. AI is made out of data ops, where 80% of your work is going to be, looking at data, understanding data, selecting data, synthesizing data, cleaning up data, and then model ops, selecting a model, training it, and then the operationalizations in the real world. And you could do all of these, and this could take years to basically master and end up with a model that gives you 20% accuracy, which doesn't justify the ends. The means here was, we wanted to get something that's going to help us, but ultimately we're not seeing any results. And this is the problem with AI. It never really gives you the output that you want in the time frame that you want it at. So we needed to start talking about AI ROI. How does a company frame the AI project or the AI initiative within its organization, so this way we don't pull the plug too early in this particular project? So some of the questions we asked ourselves is, what are we trying to predict? Is it worth guessing, right? So we realized that we just needed to know how many users are going to watch a video within the first 72 hours. That's usually where 80 to 90% of the revenue and the views are going to come. So we needed to figure out, if we were to predict the right time to publish a video, can we maximize the views in that 72-hour time frame? So we decided that we're going to create a machine that will predict the right time to publish. Then we figured out, okay, what if we were to get this right? How do we determine we had it right? So the best way to do that was to identify if within the 72 hours that a video got published, that it basically went above average of what a similar video in the past had gotten within that particular category. To do so, we needed to go in and pretty much start digging around of how WatchMojo videos had performed over time, over categories, over various slices that we could look at. So this way we can create the benchmarks to be able to identify if it was actually a successful video or not. But then we had to also make sure that the executive team understood what getting it wrong really means. Wrongly interpreting the video title and the context of a video could create, disaster in terms of revenue loss, right? So one example we saw is that, we're a lot into the film and entertainment space. So whenever the AI engine was looking for Black Panther, the movie, mistaking it for cats and felines, I guess, is not what we wanted the AI engine to do. Same thing with when we're dealing with things that topics that weren't really popular or we hadn't done a lot of videos on. For example, baby shark has nothing to do with real sharks, right? So it was important for us to set that expectations with the leadership that this thing can really awfully go wrong and it can have a negative impact on revenue. On the other hand, we also we needed to outline that, well, what is the real value we're going to get out of it? Well, it's not just revenue, right? Predicting that a video is going to be maximizing its reach is definitely going to give you revenue, but it's also going to avoid scheduling costs with the with the channel managers having a hard time really scheduling things for the optimal time if they're doing it by themselves, right? That's going to reduce the scheduling creation cycle time, increase our ability to react to mistakes, and we're going to basically get more return on assets, the videos, the cost of videos, and how much we can get in terms of margin out of that. So the next step was to figure out what data do we need in order to predict what is going to, the reach that a video would have. So we needed to know the title, the category, the description, and the tags of an upcoming video, which is the DNA of a YouTube video. And then we needed to look at what data we had to train this machine learning model. And so we realized that we had published 30,000 videos over a large time span, about 15 years. And we had all the data for how many views those videos had gotten within the first 72 hours, the likes, the subscriptions, the comments, and the characteristics of those successful videos, such as which categories were they in and who was the talent who worked on it. So ultimately, that allowed us to take a video, its title, and figure out what were the other similar videos that could basically give us an indication of how the success of that video, and then predict the right time to schedule it. We also figured out that the labels for us were the views within the first 72 hours. That was basically an indication of success. And then we ask ourselves, well, how do we even know what we're comparing this against? So we always have to basically compare against a human person using their judgment to predict the best scheduling time. So we created what we call the superstar versus a dud, which was we asked the channel managers to go through every single video that was in production and to basically make a judgment call. Based on the title, based on what you know about that video, can you let us know if this video is going to be superstar or a dud? So this allowed us to get the feedback loop from the actual channel managers in order to compare it against what the AI was going to predict. So then we asked ourselves, well, how accurate is a human? And realized a human was accurate at 67%. So the precision that we're going to look for was going to be 67 plus 1. As long as we attain that, or even if we attain 67%, we're basically going to get to being able to have AI reproduce what other channel managers do without the human intervention. So that was the first thing. The other thing was the reusability. Once this machine learning model is working, then we can basically have it work across other channels where it could basically replace the role of, or augment the role of a lot of channel managers, as well as the responsiveness to how fast does it take for this particular AI to deliver. So we put all this information on one page, which basically is our AI canvas. So this is one of the key components that we recommend most leadership teams to adopt, because these questions are very important to answer at the onset of an AI project, but also making sure that this is a piece of paper that you can even print, frame it, and put it on the walls of the company, because ultimately people need to be reminded regularly what we're trying to do and the value of what we're going to do, because ultimately nothing's going to work in an AI project. It behaves non-predictively. Everything that's going to happen, that could go wrong will happen, right? But ultimately, this AI canvas would allow you to get the buy-in from the leadership team to make it happen, to understand the consequences, to understand the value of success, and to understand the gains that we're going to get as a company, as well as the outcomes we're expecting from the machine learning module. So once we got the go-ahead to make it happen, we reviewed 30,000 videos across the WatchMojo data set, and we cleaned up the data, and that basically gave us a detailed high-resolution close-up of each video project, after which we needed to figure out if users will respond positively to a prediction. So one of the easiest things we did is then we created a dumbed-down machine learning model, a poor man's machine learning model. Not a lot of work, as you're talking about it. We're talking about like feature engineered. Most data scientists will hate me for saying this, but ultimately there is no police that's going to put us to jail for actually doing good old-fashioned AI with rules. So we basically created rules on what's the best time to actually publish a video. But what we're really interested in was creating an interface and seeing how a human being will react to this prediction. Because if human beings don't react positively to a prediction, then there's no point in doing the AI project. So this basically allowed us to basically predict the number of views a video would get, and basically say this video should fit on a Monday. There was no AI behind this. It was all fake. But we realized that, yes, we are actually heading in the right direction. Humans are engaging with it, and this can actually augment their work. Then we realized that we needed to make this machine learning module as accurate as a human being. So we needed to understand our data. One of the things we encountered, biggest challenge, and this is the problem with most AI projects, you will actually encounter a lot of problems with data. There's seasonality issues with YouTube data. There's the numbers of videos that were published in a particular day. There's the numbers of subscriber base that kept on growing, and the YouTube traffic growth, and the YouTube algorithm changes. And we realized that there were both changes on YouTube and as WatchMojo as we were capturing these data for 30,000 videos, which would create biases within our data set that we needed to clean up. So ultimately, we needed to ask ourselves, how much will it cost to acquire all this data, normalize it, and how will it impact the prediction and its accuracy? So ultimately, we gave up. We said, you know what? We're not going to allow this machine learning to be able to actually schedule a video. we're basically going to start with the prediction being done by the machine learning module, because this was the cheapest way we could get to success. Then have the human being make the judgment, and the human being make the action. So by providing human with enough context, we're able to mitigate for the lack of data that we had. So ultimately, we created this interface that gave channel managers the feedback they needed on a particular video, and if the timing was right to publish. And if the machine were to say publish now, a human being was able to read the data around it and make the final judgment call and take action. So ultimately, 75% of Supernatural's predictions came pretty close to video actually publishing gross, and the CEO was quite impressed with it. But unfortunately, we did pull the plug on this project. What for? Mainly because AI projects is a long-term commitment. A long-term commitment in analyzing data and a lot of costs. And most companies don't have the maturity yet, the processes and the tools to be able to handle the human aspect, the negotiations that go behind maintaining these AI projects, which are perceived as being very costly. So ultimately, I wanted to thank you guys all. We're going to be having a little discussion about what it means to basically continue and persevere with AI projects within your organization, and the consequences of that. Thanks.
So when you were discussing, I find it extremely interesting that for you, like when we build state machine on our end, we're trying to get like around 90% or something like that. But yeah, I guess if your 67 is fine because you're basically using the AI as a tool to help highlight the relevant information. And that was something I thought that was very interesting how the project, I guess, evolved. But the difference, when you said you went you used rule-based and then you call this dumb AI, don't you think that in the community people have like no respect for state machines?
I've seen this in the engineering community. The issue is that like the object-oriented programming was big and everybody was trying to write in classes. And ultimately, I think that for AI to democratize itself, we need to stop basically policing each other on how the best way of doing AI. Most organizations out there are going to initiate AI projects, and it's important for us to know that there's a low-cost way of doing it, because doing it the way that currently is being done in academia and in bigger institutions or these big companies like Facebook and Google, it's a purist approach to AI, but there's no reason why we can't do it the good old-fashioned way.
But even the purist approach to AI, where I guess I kind of disagree, is that at some point there's always some human decisions, perhaps either as like what's the choice, just choosing which data point you're actually feeding to your model, or how you're going to weight the different synapses in your neural network. This has a huge impact on how the data is interpreted. So sometimes I just feel as if like it's used to kind of say, oh no, it's like a machine that makes a difference. But in the back end, it's a bit like a Boston Consulting Group model where, you have a result that's supposed to be absolute, but like, it's just human that are making guesses somewhere in the process that taints the whole result.
I think it's just as an organization, your ultimate goal is to create value to your users or create optimization internally in order to be able to increase your margin, right? That's what the C-suite leadership wants. How you go about it is irrelevant to them, right? But ultimately, if you're product managing an AI project, you realize that you need to show increments of success to the organization, success that aligns with the value they want to create. Right? So ultimately, if you create a poor man's machine learning module that interprets data the wrong way, but ultimately allows to show an increment of success, then the chances of that AI budget to be renewed for the next quarter, the next year, are going to be increased, right? And if you can't show that increment of success and you're constantly saying, we need to rework the data, we're going to do this, and you're focusing on the how, the chances of the plug being pulled out of that AI project are pretty high. So I think we have a responsibility of saying, you know what, we're going to do this cheaply first. We're going to show success. And in the software world, there's a concept of MVP, minimum viable product. And there should be a concept of minimum viable AI, right? At the bottom line, show your executive team that the amount of money they've put inside these data scientists and all the work that's going into it is going to create immediate value, enough value for them to align and continue giving you the green light for the future investments.
Yeah, and for us, for example, in The Secret Life of Monsters, a lot of this is trying to have this magic moment with users where they feel like that the interaction is natural. That's our complete goal, and often when we approach technology project, that's the only thing that we look at is how can we delight our users, and users are not necessarily sophisticated. Sometimes it's just being able to kind of understand what kind of interaction people will actually do, so you can actually plan around those interactions to give the correct answer that the people will work. But then I guess a deep learning algorithm can actually help you process that data to kind of help you better understand what interactions might happen in the future as well. So that's kind of where you can segue from your state machine to using artificial neural network to kind of create new rules and optimizing it in that way.
Yeah, an AI project it's going to take a lifetime to execute correctly. And I think that there's key learning at every single point. But what you're describing is how to approach the problem better, right? But I think that the biggest issue we have is that C-suite doesn't care about how to approach the project better. They just want to keep funding the project. And I think it's important for us to constantly say, yeah, the how is going to change. The what might change as well. But the reason why we're doing this isn't changing. And that reason why needs to be set at the onset of the project and reminded constantly, so this way they never pull the plug on it. And the how will change constantly and will improve. And then the first time you basically do the monster project, you might get some key learnings and you're going to reinvest money in order to make it better. And the technology is going to get better, but the why is not going to change.
Yeah.
So it's important to baseline the why from the onset and repeat it constantly. And I think that's the key thing that most organization needs to focus on. And I don't think they focus on it. They just simply start by doing AI and analyzing data sometimes, and they forget why they're doing it, right? That articulation is quite important.
I completely agree with you. I think it's something that you see in many things, that you need to have kind of a clear intent of like, what's the goal, what are you trying to deliver, and what are you trying to achieve for your users? And then from there, you can find like the correct way. And one issue as well that we discussed earlier was kind of the technology depreciation. Like I was telling, we use TensorFlow, for example, which belongs to Google, and then you told me today that TensorFlow is going to be depreciated. So for us, like one of I guess because we build our own overlay on top, like not everything will be lost. We'll be able to switch to, I guess, a similar service and then keep our overlay with all the R&D we did to have the lowest latency possible. But that's something like, how do you approach AI knowing that, a lot of the different technologies will, will go away?
Yeah. I think that like within big organizations, people will call it an AI project. Now, the word project means that there's a beginning and an end, right? And maybe we shouldn't be calling it projects because we know these are long-term initiatives. Maybe we should call them AI initiatives, because ultimately we could basically bake in the fact that this is something that's going to be ongoing, just like software is an ongoing development, that eventually like your technology stack's going to get old, you're going to have to change it, and you're going to have to upgrade, and all these things going to have to happen. So eventually what's important is to sensitize to the leadership team that this is an ongoing initiative, and it's not a one-time project. We're going to bring in consultants, we're going to get some key results, and we're just going to let go and forget. Because if you build and forget, then all you're basically doing is not really maximizing what you can get out of AI.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we need to kind of internalize this so that we can build our own project to keep our tech sovereignty. Because one of the issue I hear, and I had some talks with people earlier, is like, oh, why do you want to build a project like that? Microsoft is doing it, Amazon is doing it. Like for us, we use Amazon, some of their neural network. We've used Microsoft facial recognition API in the past. But right now we're trying to build our own. I think that we can compete with big tech, when you do something that actually solves a very specific problem, but what would you say like to people that say, you shouldn't even go because Microsoft is already doing it?
I mean, if Microsoft's already doing it and that allows you to do a poor man's machine learning model, go ahead, right? But eventually, like just with the example with Watch Mojo, if YouTube were to give us the best time to publish videos, they would basically be using every channel. So the audience would not be our audience, it would be the audience of others, right? So it's important to contextualize and personalize the experience based on your own data. So even if YouTube did it, even if Facebook did it, even if Google did it, that doesn't mean that it's going to be working for your needs. So if the AI is an initiative that extends over a long period of time, and year number 1, you're using Microsoft solutions or Amazon solutions, year number 2, you're basically making it your own, but that comes at a cost. But you realize that that cost personalizes your data to the point where you're able to provide better results for your to your audience and create value for your organization, but then why not, right? But I don't think the entire world should be using these vanilla technologies, basically. Like, I wouldn't call them vanilla, but they are vanilla. It's basically third-party data that you don't control that basically train the machine learning module to do something that's helpful as a turnkey solution, but it might not be helpful long-term.
Yeah, I like when you use vanilla because it kind of shows it's a one-size-fits-all, and it's something that we always look into as well is that we don't control the roadmap as well. It's a bit like Angular, for example. When we started building in Angular, it was supposed to be never kind of change, and then there was a huge paradigm change, and then we were toast. Yeah. We had to do something else.
But it does get you started. I think what you were saying is about a state machine. You have the choice of going with a state machine, or you have the choice of basically going with Microsoft, Amazon, Google solutions, right? It's a cheap way to getting into AI. As long as it's not the only solution that you choose. It's just step 1 of many. And if you can get your leadership to accept that particular vanilla solution was just to get your feet wet, to provide quick value, and to validate that this is something they want to further invest in, and that's great. But I wouldn't be subject to them because, there's a bait and switch there. They did it for Angular, Facebook did it for React, and then they're definitely going to start doing it for some of these AI technologies they're doing. So you don't want to be bait and switch. So you start off with them, and then you basically end up creating your own independence with your own data and your own machine learning.
Yeah, or at least always having in the back of your mind, like you use existing building blocks because it's easier, but if you have your own model behind, so you have the intelligence is proprietary because it's your own model based around your users, based around your data. In that case, if one building block is depreciated or one of them, like there's so much vaporware today, if Facebook announces something, you'll have Google, Microsoft, Apple's going to announce maybe something similar just to say that they're doing it to appease their shareholders, because otherwise everyone's going to be like, oh, we're not doing anything, but and it's hard to navigate through all of that to kind of know what's going to be supported for a long time and what's going to be kind of just thrown away because we're too small to.
Well, at the end of the day, these are corporations and they're supposed to create value for their shareholders. So if they're giving something away and it's let's say they're giving it away for free and it's costing them $1, well, I mean, eventually they're going to cut it off, right? And I think that it's great for them to keep this first-to-market aura. And that's great for them to be recognized as a first-to-market trendsetter. But eventually, if they can't monetize it, they're out. So we need to recognize that, and we need to work with the benefits of it, but also realize the double-edged sword that it is, and eventually move away from it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think as well, like when to kind of circle back to the initial idea behind this panel, what was kind of when should you look into AI? I think that everyone today, like if you're in the entertainment space, you should try to look at ways to use state machines / AI to find ways, because what these can do, they can replace humans for, I guess, low-end tasks, and also to provide instant gratification or instant interactions in many different contexts for us. Like we use a lot of stuff on mobile as well, where we'll use a smaller state machine to kind of understand what a mobile device of a user is doing, for example, in a music show, and then trigger an animation or things like that. What would be your recommendation?
I mean, every future product, digital product, will have an AI initiative or a few AI initiatives within it, right? And I think that you need to ask yourself, like, am I doing this to expand my footprint internationally or across industries or something, or I'm trying to create innovation within my industry, or am I trying to create optimizations within my organization, right? But there must be a reason why you're doing it. And oftentimes I think that people have a tendency to want to experiment with AI, not really knowing what they're trying to get out of it, right? So articulating.
What have you seen? Like,
I think AI has huge potential in optimization, right? Replacing humans, not completely humans, but the example with WatchMojo is a great example of saving time. Making have them do less predictions and more judgment, and being able to replace them from being day-to-day doers to more managers, closer to the organization's goals and stuff. So that's an easy win for most organizations. The secondary one is more of like, if you're trying to expand your footprint internationally, and there's language issues and cultural issues, and you cannot have boots on the ground in various countries and geographies, maybe AI can definitely help you. I've seen a lot of the newspapers, starting using AI to translate articles without really having to, have an editorial team or create front pages across, like Microsoft had replaced all of its editors to an AI that basically figures out what article should be on the homepage of, I think it was MSN, and they still exist.
Wow.
And it's funny, but like that allows them to internationalize in multiple countries without having to have humans on staff, right? So ultimately, there is a value there from an optimization perspective that allows these companies to make more money, or basically be able to grow internationally without having to hire these people in China and Dubai and in Europe and Germany and in Africa, right? Like, so there are benefits to it, but I would recommend that any small and medium business that's looking into AI to take a step back and do the exercise we did with WatchMojo of just identifying what is the cost of success, what is the cost of a mistake, what is the value of success, what are we going to gain out of it as a company, what data do we have and what data do we need, and then based on that, be able to get the green light to move forward.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Because when I look at, like, when you talk about translation, internationalization, for example, what the translate tweet function from Twitter, for example, it kind of allows for a personalized experience. Everyone now can have a more personalized experience because we use machine learning to be able to, for example, change the language in real time. And we understand, because it's kind of user generated, we're actually asking for this translation. It manages our expectations better because we kind of understand that the information, we're not expecting it to be perfect. Well, if a tweet, for example, was in our own language, we would expect it to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
So when you deal like with C-suite and all that, how do you manage expectations around
I think it comes down
AI
to
projects?
I think it comes down to saying there is the prediction part, there's the judgment part, and there is the actual action part, right? Which part of this are we basically going to put AI in? And where does the human come back in? Because if you expect everything to be done by AI, then that's a huge project, right? But if it's just one of these components, like as soon as you bring a human back in, you're basically letting the world know that if your AI fails, that there is a human to catch it, right?
Yeah.
And if the leadership team is ready to take that first step, just predict something. And once the prediction's done, have the human judge and take action, then that's a very low-cost experiment without many mistakes. But if you try to automate the entire thing, just like a self-driving car, where it needs to identify the bicyclist, it needs to judge that it's a bicyclist, and it needs to take action to avoid it, and that doesn't work, and it hits the bicyclist, but ultimately that AI project is dead, right?
Yeah.
So it's more important to put these safety measures either through the UX UI or by basically having a human present making a particular decision. I'm sure that at MSN, even though they're translating and creating the homepage experience through AI, there's still an editor validating that there is no misleading, offensive, sexually inappropriate content in there, right? So eventually, you are reducing your workforce, but you're basically letting the the leadership team of a company know that there are steps to AI, and we no need to go all the way to the maximum. If you were to ask data scientists, of course they're going to want the full automation. But if you were to ask the business, they might just benefit from just an incremental prediction as a beginning and work their way up.
Yeah, so what I love in what you're saying, and I think that's kind of the takeaway that we had in our project, is kind of being able to break down the project in multiple manageable components, and then in some components, for example, just use a human to put the data in because they know, take someone that they know, and some other components then you'll need to use machine learning, train an artificial neural network or use a state machine, whatever works. But if you're able to kind of, I think, break it down, and that's probably the hardest part, like conceptually, because you need to have a really good understanding of like what can AI do and what are like the limitation of the different tools that you have. But once you're able to do that, you can actually build a model where you can kind of swap out parts and then start with something simple like you're saying, and then kind of build it over time and optimize it by staying in control of like and understanding the different variables.
Yeah, I think that's what the story of AI is. You have to sell it to the leadership team as a story that evolves over time. And the investment is not just a one-time thing. So the more you're able to tell the chapters that the story is going to have, the easier is it to sell the entire life cycle of this initiative. If you were just to say it's a project and we're going to try to automate everything from A to Z from the beginning, you will fail. Yeah. You will fail not because your data scientists will fail, but because ultimately the business is not going to see the value it wanted to get in the speed at which they wanted to get it. And that's just going to create like this expectation that AI is not right for our business, and ultimately that business is going to lose out on the benefits of AI, right? So just breaking it down into a story in its multiple chapters and being able to predict that, over time we're going to go from here to here to here, and eventually if the business realizes that no, we still want a human to take action. For example, if you look at Google, if you basically look at the mail. The Google Mail function where it actually automatically figures out what you need to be writing. I mean, it predicts what you need to be writing, but the human still has to click on the button to say one of these three options is what I want to say, right? So I don't think they have an intent eventually to replace that human action by basically just automating the whole thing and just saying, you know what? Paul, whenever he answers his emails, this is what he usually has to say. I think I want to give myself the right to say no. So if they understood that they're only going to keep it to prediction and have the human make the judgment and take the action, and that's the end of their AI project. The best they can do is just make that predictive text that's coming up better. Yeah. But it's still not going to add more value than what it initially added with the poor version of this ML that they initially introduced.
It might make you write like 3 times faster, though. Yeah. So you're going to be able to send like so many more emails, or.
Well, what I'm trying to say is like that guess, what's worth guessing, that guess of what I'm about to write. If the poor man's version of that ML that they created gave me 1 out of 3 good answers, and then the new version that they spent another $1 million on gave me 3 out of 3 good potential answers, what's the real value there? There is that 80-20 rule where you're going to get 80% of the value through your poor man's ML, and 20% of the additional value you're going to have to put 80% more cost and more resources into getting that. But is it really worth getting?
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
Are we still on? I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
We're on?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think it kind of circles around the conversation. I don't know if there's any.
I think I definitely wanted to highlight the need for organizations to understand what type of resources they need for AI, right? Because oftentimes we'll deal with consultants, and the consultants will come in with their data scientists and their data engineers, right? And that's all important for AI, because 80% of the work is going through this data and engineering of the ML. But ultimately, I think there is a role for an AI product manager. The idea of a product manager being someone who can engage with the business to articulate and sell the dream, and not only sell the dream, but sell the consequences of getting it wrong. Sell the value the iterative value that was created every time that a new approach to how we're going to do it has changed. And then being able to explain to them the direction we're heading, as well as the consequences of the impact that it could have, and just revisit this iteratively. And I think that's a role that's misunderstood in most organizations, because organizations who are attempting AI today, let's just say they're SMBs trying to do it, usually have an IT department, they have a marketing department, and they don't know what other department they need to run this show, right? They do need a data science department, but do they need a product management department to glue all these things together? Because ultimately you have an expectations on the engineers to change the infrastructures. You have an expectations from the data scientists to create this data and clean it and figure out the ML. But you also have an expectations for marketing and for the rest of the organization to sell the output and basically make it profitable and allow the company to monetize off of it. So there needs to be somebody in the company organizing the AI and outbound communicating it, inbound communicating it, to make sure that there is buy-in long term. And most organizations don't have that. And then what we end up seeing is a lot of infighting between data science, engineering, marketing, sales, trying to figure out who's steering the ship.
Yeah,
and that's also.
No, I'd say even like I'd go for a product owner. Mm-hmm. You know, that has a stake in developing the product, and that can actually like take decision over time. Yeah. Because often, and we've had this with our project, for example, working with data scientists as well. Like they're all about the data, but they don't necessarily have an understanding of how the data, once it's processed, will affect the outcome or the output from it, right? Yeah. So you kind of need to have this understanding of the whole chain and the understanding of what the technology can actually do for you and for your user to be able to make the right calls as to how do I structure my data coming in. Yeah.
But also this person needs to sell the value that it's going to create to the leadership team. So this way they empower the marketing team, the sales team, to also go out there and make commitments to customers, right? Yeah. So for example, if your product is going to integrate AI and make things better for the end user, for the customers, especially in a B2B situation, then your sales team is expecting results. But AI doesn't give you any results. AI is like, maybe it'll work, but maybe it won't work, right? So how do you basically set those expectations where you're like, no, you know what we know? We know that it's going to work within the context of this, but if there's an error, this is how the error looks like. Here's how we're going to intercept the error through UX, UI, and here's how we're basically going to prevent this from becoming, a nightmare for you guys. And can you communicate this? Can you sell this to customers? Because the customers is definitely going to see the value in it first, but we're also protecting ourselves in case it goes awfully wrong, right? And these roles don't exist. They have project managers, but project managers are responsible of budgets, of timing, of delivery. But the problem with AI projects is there is no concept as time. You constrain an AI team in 3 months, and you're just going to get you're not going to get much results, right? Because most probably you're going to get 20% accuracy, and a human being's at 80%, so that doesn't really help deploying it in production. So you don't need really project managers. You need salesmen. You need guys and gals who are ready to sell the value that it's going to create to the company on a regular basis, to marketing, to engineering, to the CEO, to the CFO, so this way they continue this investment in this incremental value that the AI is generating short, mid, and long term. These roles don't exist today, and I find it's important for us to outline that, a company, the first thing a company should do is really identify this role, the owner of the AI product, the AI initiative, and see it as an initiative and invest in it long term.
And maybe sometimes, like, using the term AI seems so scientific and all that, but in the end, a lot of how it's used is just automation. Yeah. Like, what are the actions that you're doing that you can automate or make happen automatically, and then maybe whatever. These days we do a lot of stuff in procedural art, generative art. So basically it's a rule set. You give different parts, different brushes to an algorithm. You could call it an AI, and then it's going to do art.
Yeah.
We have projects like that where we use a robotic arm to draw. So we feed it different parts, and then it draws something unique. It's really cool. But you kind of need to understand the different limitation and then define a rule set and make sure that it actually serves a purpose. Because what we've done, we've worked a lot in the past with conversational AI, and the biggest problem of chatbots and so on is that most of the time they're slower than either if you're actually reading or than if you're looking at an FAQ or something like that, or if you call on the phone. So they're useless.
Yeah, it's true.
And the reason for that, I think, is that the people that are actually setting them up don't take enough time to kind of map out where can something like this can actually solve issues for my customer faster.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because there's two values here. There's what the business is going to get value from the AI, and then there is what KPIs do we expect our data scientists to hit. And it's not just about the accuracy of the ML, but it's also, as you say here, how fast can it basically can give insight, because it is useless if it's taking 10 minutes, right? And so these things need to be discussed as a group collectively, and decisions need to be made where people are aware of the consequences of their decisions and the alternatives they decided not to, and communicated to the rest of the organization. I think that most organizations need to equip themselves not only with a data scientist. I think Mila calls it data intelligence rather than calling it AI. And they basically say, look, this is a data intelligence initiative within the organization. It comes with us, grabbing data, cleaning data, understanding data, and potentially doing predictions with data. But it's a data project nonetheless, right? And any company needs to invest in data at some point or another, because digital products create data. That they're data machines, if you think about it. And the more you're basically in the digital product space, the more data you have. The more data you have, the more opportunities there are for you to understand it, make business decisions, and start making predictions out of it. So eventually having a data department within organizations that deals with data intelligence is an important step for most organizations.
Yeah, I think so as well. But do you think when you're developing like an AI-based product, like for example, chatbot, I find it's a very interesting, or conversational AI. Should you prioritize speed, meaning that I'd rather have my chatbot to provide you with like a completely wrong answer or a wrong product suggestion, but allow the human that receives it to say like, I don't like this, so you're kind of training it faster? Or should you take more time to process? I think I would always go for speed.
Well, the end user will want speed, but if the business is more interested in training one bot and being able to use it for multiple other customers of theirs, right? And that's how they value this particular AI project. Then it's very hard to basically focus on speed, because ultimately the customer is always right. The customer wants speed, but if the business realizes that they cannot achieve that speed, and it's more important for them to basically meet business objectives like sales objectives, then they're going to prioritize that particular KPI. Now, it's important to come back to this person, this owner, the salesman of AI, to be able to say, ultimately, if you can sell 100 of these MLs to 100 customers, and they're all slow, you're basically going to get 90 of those customers are going to leave eventually, right? So there is this element of speed that needs to be brought in. So if you have two KPIs, one being, how can I spread this AI across multiple customers, but how fast it is, and then you're able to basically articulate two KPIs, two objectives that you're trying to achieve, and that helps at least sensitize with the leadership that it's not just what the sales team wants. That really prevails here.
But I think it comes down to like a one size fits all approach to something. I would tend to, but then again, that's because that's what we do. But I would go to deliver value, I think you have to go as specialized as possible, because when you're specialized, you have as much control as you can over the context, because the more specialized you have, the more you kind of know the specific context of what you're having. So the narrower you can put your focus, so the most efficient you can develop an AI, because the hardest is when, you know, there's no context, when it's like super broad, because then it needs to be able to perform in so many different situations that that's kind of where your development cost, in my opinion, will like balloon and so on. But if you're able, instead of, let's say, doing something that you're trying to be broad and then apply to 90 different customers, maybe if you're able to find 10 specific use case and then do very more specialized scenarios and specialized machine learning algorithm, you'll be able to deliver a lot more value and with a lot more speed to those customers.
So if I recap what you said, someone has to ask the question, is this worth guessing? But that someone also has to ask the question, is any of this really going to add value or deliver value? Let it be for the customer or let it be for the business. And then figure out what is that, what are we really trying to achieve, so this way it doesn't balloon, right? And those are important decisions that most leadership teams need to make in their organization. Is it happening? I don't know. I hope there is. If it's not happening, then, you know, you could definitely come and check me out and definitely can help the company articulate that. I think most consultancies are interested in solving the problems of AI, but not the people problems, which is the leadership team acknowledging the value of it and giving the go-ahead and basically sustaining that initiative long-term. Software development is about people, not about technology. I think AI is the same thing. It's about people.
People
making
first.
Sure that people are bought in and give green light these issues. They have their say, their considerations are taken under account, and then eventually it's a collective decision of moving forward on this.
I think that's all the time we had, but that was fun. Really enjoyed our discussion.
It's great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.